Good morning. Good morning, Texas and Louisiana. You are watching on the Smart Money Culture TV network, as well as joining from around the world on Twitter or X, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the rest. We have a great weekend that just finished up here in the District of Columbia, especially for me and my family. My daughter graduated 8th grade, and her school did a wonderful thing. I never knew that 8th grade was such a big deal, but I guess it is now. So that's cool. It was a little bit funny, and then I thought, you know what, giving them a very nice moment in order for them to remember all the wonderful things that they did. And so I just hopped on board and got into the festivities, and it was nice. It was nice. So, I tell people all the time that you want to have a family, and you want it. That's something that you want to do. You don't want to miss it. If you do and it's not your thing, that's fine too. But having a family is really important. And with our population collapse that we have, really going on right now, that's a real issue as well. So there is a lot going on this week. Of course, Trump will be in Detroit this week at the People's Conference. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We will be there at the People's Conference. That is the plan, covering it live. Everybody's going to be there. Donald Trump, of course, will be there. We have Byron Donalds that'll be there. Just name a few. You have Laura Trump. You have, of course, the guy that started it. I guess I can just scroll over to their site here. The People's Convention. So you can get a discount on this if you haven't already gotten your tickets. You can get a discount on it here. I think. Let me see. This too much. Here we go. Boom. On this, let me just put up my thing here. Use Impact Money. And you can get a 25% discount on this. You go to the People's Convention. The People's Convention in Detroit. There we go. Boom. I'll run that on the bottom. And then I just want to show you very quickly some of the people that are going to be there, including us. So, of course, it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be there. But here we have, of course, the big guy, Donald Trump. We have Charlie Kirk, who's the organizer of the event. This is his event. Vivek Ramaswamy. I won't run through all these. Ben Carson. Basically, all the guys that are being, I think, on the short list for VP. Steve Bannon, Donald Trump Jr., Governor Kristi Noem, Tulsi Gabbard, Candace Owens, Jack Proziak, Roger Stone. Look at that. Kim Garfield, Matt Gaetz, Carrie Lake, he real crowd favorite there. Scott Presler, speaking of crowd favorites, Nigel Farage coming. The great Mike Lindell will be there as well. Of course, Byron Donalds. If you haven't been to a Trump rally, this might be the one that you want to hop in on. It's in Detroit. I know Detroit sometimes gets a bad name, but Detroit's beautiful. It has some very, very nice parts of Detroit, and that's gonna be a lot of fun, and we'll be there. So my brother is still here in the U.S. as well, so we are planning on being there, and looking forward to it. Here, let me just so a lot going on as well in the world. We have elections in a lot of different places, and that's election year is like that around the world. So we have really the political situation that is just, it's all over the place, right? So that's happening. We have, of course, what's going on in London. London has been, the UK, a lot of these other areas, including the US. That's one thing that people don't really realize until I think you go around the world. And that's the U.S. even more than everybody else is much more. We have way more different people here than any other place, and it is, it is what it is at this point. Of course, we had Biden, quote unquote, shut down he quote unquote shut down the border, which is a total joke. Everybody knows it's a total joke. But he's brought in a lot of people that are going to be voting. So our election is going to be really interesting. But it's not just our election. All the elections really of the world, especially the Western world, are like this right now. So Europe, Ireland, Portugal, the whole entire West. This is what we're dealing with really right now. So pretty interesting situation that we have, and it will be quite interesting. I'm sure we'll all be watching. Of course, Donald Trump is the crowd favorite for winning the U.S. election by far. It's not even a contest. People don't realize that it's so much that he has so much support here, but they should, because he does. And he certainly has a group of people that don't like him a lot, but that's always the case. You can't do anything in life that's worth a darn without people not liking you, right? I mean, trust me, I know. And if you try to do great things, you don't always succeed either. And if you don't succeed, then you get more people that don't like you. So, but it's very polarizing. And it was one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't want Trump. That's what they said. Look, this guy is a polarizing figure. We don't want him in here. But there's no stopping. There's really no stopping him. He is such, even around the world, he is such a force on the political scene and on the world scene. I mean, there's just no denying it. Even influencing world politics, influencing world events now, as he's not even in the presidency. So, and then you look at what they went through to stop him in 2020, in 2016, 2020, and now look what they're going through now in order to stop him. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Indictment after indictment. 34 counts he was just found guilty of, and no one's even really sure what he's guilty of. I mean, I know the guy's not perfect. Sure, he did some things, but if we went after Bill Clinton or something, which we did go after Bill Clinton back in the day, which was unfortunate, I think. But if we went after him like we did, if we held everybody to the same standard that we're holding Trump to, everybody would be indicted. All the former presidents, they all have their stuff. I mean, Obama sent pallets of cash over to, wherever. He did all kinds of stuff. Bill Clinton, all kinds of stuff, And so, what impeaching Bill Clinton did, I feel like, was it set the standard of now everybody they always will just want to impeach people. And not saying they don't deserve it, but it's not good, obviously, for the country. And so now we have a situation where everybody's Trump gets in again, they're going to try to impeach him again. Trust me, and is he even going to be able to keep himself out of jail? The judicial system is completely taken over. Of course, we talk about the central bank a lot, right? The central bank was installed in 1913, and the central banking cartel has been running the country since that time. And I blame it on the mess. I mean, 98% of American wealth was lost over the last 111 years. The U.S. dollar has lost 98% of its value. They confiscated all the gold from everybody. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that went on over the last 100 years that they don't teach in school. And when you hear about it, you go, gosh, that's some crazy stuff. So it's important that we talk to each other. It's important that we see each other. That's why I'm going to make my best efforts to get out there to Detroit to see everybody. That's why I do the morning show every morning. That's why we do it. It's a lot of fun. And, the Smart Money Culture TV network, guys, we're growing a lot. Smart Money Culture TV. If you want to watch on your TVs there, or if you want to see it on TV, you can go to smartmoneyculture.tv and watch as we're broadcasting there. But we're growing a lot. We're adding people. We're adding content. We're adding stations. We're doing a lot of stuff. So that Smart Money Culture TV network is something that's very special. it's people like us who put it together, and yeah, I'm very happy to be a part of it. So, as well, speaking happy to be a part of it, of course, the great Matt Dixon. Matt Dixon has been doing the show with me every day since the beginning. I mean, he has, besides recording a couple of shows, which we've all done that. He has not missed a show. It really is something else, and we have a great friendship. And he is a great guy. So what he did this morning was he recorded his market watch. So I'm going to play that. It is pretty interesting. We have a bit of a pullback on the markets here. He's going to talk about it a little bit more. Silver is the bright side of things. Silver is up, and just even as we're talking here, we'll see what Matt has to say. I kind of feel like, well, let's see what Matt has to say, and then we'll go from there. This is the great Matt Dixon with his Market Watch report recorded just a couple hours ago. Here we go.
Good morning to you, Bruce, and good morning to all the Impact Money viewers. So we've got, well, I can't be with you today, first of all. Unfortunately, I've got some pressing meetings that I can't get out of, but it doesn't mean there's not lots of really powerful and useful information for traders and for viewers everywhere. The US has been front and center once again, and we have seen a massive spike in US dollar. So we'll look into that a little bit. But first of all, let's just remember we've got interest rate decision coming Wednesday, and we've got CPI data coming Wednesday. So this is important. The CPI, we've got a chart here just showing the CPI. We can see it fell from very high levels back in mid-2022. And as the Fed started their rate rising policy, raising interest rates to subdue inflation, we saw that inflation CPI coming down dramatically. And then around mid-2023, we saw that CPI leveled off and started to pick up just a little bit. So the inflation level has stayed really sticky. Now, this is a problem for the Fed. We are seeing some signs of growth slowing in the US. In fact, we're seeing very mixed signals on growth in the US. We have seen some signs that unemployment is picking up. But the Fed, although they said some time ago they wanted to lower rates a few times this year, in fact, 5 times initially, they've scaled back those expectations. And so from 5 times to 4 to 3 to 2, now maybe only 1, we don't know. And the problem is the Fed cannot lower rates whilst inflation is elevated. And so their primary objective, really, over and above maintaining growth in the economy, is actually to keep inflation under check. They cannot allow inflation to get out of hand. That is their worst case scenario. And so even if growth isn't robust, they will keep interest rates relatively high in order to tackle inflation. So these CPI figures coming out Wednesday are going to be absolutely pivotal to the Fed's decision. Now, if we see any tick up in inflation, then the Fed will not be able to lower rates, and they won't be able to indicate lower rates coming. So at the moment, the market expectations for the interest rate decision Wednesday are above 90% that they're going to remain on hold. So once again, they will not be able to lower rates. And depending on the CPI inflation rate, if it remains elevated, the Fed will not be able to signal during their Q&A session and during their statement, they will not be able to signal that they're going to lower rates at any time in the near future. They'll say they're going to remain data dependent, etc., the usual thing. But if that's the case, if CPI is at all elevated, that will validate the recent move up in the US dollar. So let's just take a little look back at that US dollar. So we can see here's a picture of the US dollar, basically a dollar index. And this is a measure of the dollar against a basket of currencies. And so we can see Friday, when the data came out, this massive spike in US dollar. And it actually fits with the longer term view of what I had for the US dollar. I had this labeled in some time ago, saying that the move down is corrective. And when we say corrective, it means that the impulsive direction was to the upside. And for the time being, this movement down is all overlapping. So we can see that basically this move up here overlap this move down here, this move up here overlap this move down here. And clearly, this move up that we had Friday overlaps the previous move down here. So this is overlapping. This is very clearly what's called corrective movement. It's against the trend. And actually, this looks like impulsive movement that we had from Friday to the upside because there's no downward corrections whatsoever in that move. Not to say 100%, but we're looking in the case of all probabilities that the dollar index may have bottomed here and we may be seeing more upside now, especially if we see elevated CPI on Wednesday. So this is not good for risk assets. And this is why we got a sharp sell-off in risk assets on Friday. And actually why I warned in advance that people should look to protect long positions, or if they're going, they could even potentially look at going short, and there was sensible risk reward there. And again, we'll look at other charts just to show that risk reward, those risk reward levels and barriers to show where you could potentially take positions. So we had, basically we had all the divergences in place. And again, we can show some of those when we look at Bitcoin and some of the risk assets. But this is, as I say, quite concerning for risk assets, the fact that we're seeing such dollar strength, because when we see this level of dollar strength, it means that money is flowing into US treasuries, that's US bonds basically, and it's flowing out of risk assets. So we will see, probably associated with this, we'll start to see maybe a little outflow even from the Bitcoin ETF. So there's been massive net inflows to the ETF, and that's what supported the Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is at a crossroads for the time being. I think long term, the outlook, the fundamentals are fantastic. So we see everything looking in favor of Bitcoin at the moment. It's got limited supply, whereas the Fed did almost infinite printing of fiat of the US dollar. So that limited supply, we've got actually diminishing supply of Bitcoin because we recently had the halving event, and we'll get ongoing halving events as time passes, as the years go by. So a diminishing supply of Bitcoin. We've got fantastic demand for Bitcoin with the ETF. So we've got not only the retail demand that we had over all those years that took it from 0 to 69,000, we now have institutional demand on top. And that will probably only increase as we get more and more ETFs approved around the world. And we saw last week, I think it was last week, we saw the approval of the Thai ETF by the SEC in Thailand. So these are all positive things. We see countries adopting Bitcoin now as basically a hedge against runaway inflation. So we're seeing that in more and more countries. So Bitcoin has real solid foundation for this move that we've seen. And I think long term, the outlook is very positive for Bitcoin. But short term, we need to be aware that Bitcoin is still viewed as a risk asset. It's not completely and entirely a safe haven. It's still very much a risk asset. So people invest in Bitcoin to get really solid returns, and they're moving out of the fixed interest bonds, that kind of thing, especially US Treasuries. They're moving out of US Treasuries in general into Bitcoin, which is a hedge against inflation as well. So we'll jump across before we go to Bitcoin. We'll take a little look at gold, because gold also has moved pretty much according to expectation. We did say that we were expecting, it could have been over, but we're expecting most likely a move down here in gold. And that's exactly what we're seeing. We have this again labeled well in advance, and we may even move a little bit further, but this could all turn around even if we see further movement down, as is most likely expected. This is most likely going to be some kind of expanded flat correction. So we have an A wave down, we have a B wave higher, which actually goes beyond the origin of A. Then the C wave is most likely to go beyond the termination of wave A here. So we'd expect probably a little bit more movement down. But if we see elevated inflation on Wednesday, then we'd likely see gold, which is a traditional hedge against inflation, start to rise again, as we've got here labeled with this arrow here. If I can just move out a little bit, you can see the arrow here, clearly from maybe a little bit lower levels, expected to give gold a push to new all-time highs once again. So I do think that gold is that traditional hedge against inflation. So it looks as though inflation is rearing its ugly head once again. That when we got that movement, just to check back again, when we got that leveling off of inflation. Maybe it's due to pick up again. And that actually happened once before historically. Back in the 1980s, they thought they'd tamed inflation. They raised interest rates. They thought they'd tamed inflation, but then it took off again. That's the big worry at the moment, that inflation will take off because the Fed will not be able to lower rates. That is worrying because maybe the Fed will need to, will be pressure to lower rates to try to keep the economy pushing ahead, especially in this election year. But really they can't do. Their primary objective is to tackle elevated inflation. So that's the concern. We're seeing as well, oil has seen a bit of a pickup. And again, oil and gold do have some correlation. So maybe we have a bit lower to go. We broke below this long-term support, relatively long-term support for oil. We broke below it. Maybe we're going to retest it and push down again. But oil is a two-way. It's driven very much by supply and demand. So whilst if economies are slowing, there'll be less demand for oil, downward pressure. But basically, if there's any supply shocks, with geopolitical issues, then obviously we'd see gold to the upside. So there are mixed pressures on oil, but it's still one to watch. So let's just jump back to, well, not back, let's just jump to Bitcoin, see where we're at there. So once again, we do see longer term, we're seeing the impulsive direction clearly is the upside. We see the strong moves to the upside without any overlap. But we see here the movement's down and the movement's up. It's very, very corrective. It's a choppy movement, which is indicative of a correction. So the upward movement is in the direction of the impulse, in the direction of the overall trend. So that overall trend is still to the upside. This is just a choppy movement kind of sideways in the big scheme of things. And I've got it labeled as a W and X. Now, potentially, this all-time high that we had here, around 73,000 on Bitcoin, that's potentially going to be overhead resistance. Now, we may still see a little bit of a push to retest that level before we see downward movement, or we may have already just peaked around these levels. But somewhere around this level, we're likely to see a pullback, most likely. If we do break higher, then we'll probably push higher and retest and then push up again. So it is possible, but remember, there's no certainties in trading. There are only probabilities. And we trade the probabilities, and we trade those probabilities using our risk-reward analysis. So at the moment, as we approach this overhead resistance, the risk is for a retracement down because this is all corrective. But there's obviously also, if we were to break through it, then we'd reverse our positions and potentially look for a retest of that. What was resistance overhead then becomes support underneath. And that's where you basically place your risk reward. Your risk would then be a danger of it breaking to the downside, but the opportunity would then be to the upside. So right now, the opportunity is to the downside with a risk of it potentially breaking to the upside. So you have to basically take into account, measure the risks and the potential rewards there, and take your trades accordingly with stop losses, with taking the appropriate trade sides, etc., etc. But just to let you know, I did notify this in advance on X. On Friday, I was exiting long positions. I actually went short a few positions, and that actually worked out really, really well. And I gave these warnings in advance that the market was potentially very near a turning point. So that's Bitcoin, which has been pretty much muted because Bitcoin is still seen as the safe haven amongst cryptocurrencies. It's actually going to be less volatile. Even in times of trouble, it will tend to be less volatile than some of the alts that we see out there. So for the time being, for example, we see Bitcoin down today so far 0.16%. And we see some of the more volatile ones, for example, Bonk, we see down 2.7%. Even Solana down 1.49%. Solana, by the way, was another one that I shorted from a little bit higher up. And we'll probably take a look at Solana next. So Solana, again, as we've seen potentially a wave 3 to the upside. And I think I'll just scroll out a little bit here just to see the bigger picture on Solana, because I do think that we've had really good price movement, very much in line with Elliott wave expectations. So from the low point, well, it even went further back here from a low point of $8 or somewhere. We had basically a wave 1 up in blue, 2 down in blue. Then wave 3 was made up itself of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in red. And then what's interesting is, and again, I'll go back to the shorter time scale so we can actually just open it out and see. So from that wave 3 in blue, we've had a pullback. Now, the first movement in this pullback appears to be in 5 waves. So that's there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And quite importantly, wave 4 does not overlap wave 1. If it did, it could not be counted as a 5-wave move. But so far, it looks to be a valid 5-wave move. Now, I don't believe that we've entered an impulse to the downside. So this 5 waves, I've labeled it as a larger wave A. And then we actually have 3 waves up, which would be a wave B. Now, potentially, we could be looking to move down in a wave C to complete a correction, a larger wave 4 correction before we then push to new local highs above this 209 area. But the risk for me is that there's potential downside. So that's telling me, and again, we've said this so many times, haven't we, that when we see a chart situation, basically where we're expecting the charts to move, the data often comes in to validate that chart expectation. So we have the chart telling us in advance what the data is likely to be. So if you ask me, and there's no guarantees, but if you ask me, I think we're going to see some sticky inflation, maybe high CPI figures, which would potentially tell us that these risk assets like Solana, like Bitcoin, like ICP, like Litecoin, XRP, etc., even Ethereum, are going to see perhaps a bit more of a push to the downside. But overall, this being a blue wave 3, overall, this is just a correction. So we still would expect this just being a wave 4, then down. We would expect a wave 5 to take us to new highs above this local high of 209. So those people who are in long-term hodl positions, I don't think you need worry. I don't like to be out of position when the overall outlook for crypto is still so strong and so bullish. Even if we see a bit of a short-term sell-off, I think the long-term situation is still looking really bullish and really good. So if you're a long-term hodler, I don't think you need to worry about seeing a bit of downside in the short term. But if you're a very short-term trader, and I tend to trade, I do hold some positions long term, but my main trading, I tend to move with the markets, with the data. I'm very data dependent. So I basically, as I said, I actually got out of long positions. I went short, and we've actually seen some nice movement down, which has validated those positions. Right now, this could be a 1-2-1-2. So we could be expecting a substantial move to the downside. So the risk to the upside will be a break above here. So that's where basically, if I'm taking a position around here, my stop loss has to be somewhere above here. So I have to factor in, am I prepared to take that much loss if I take my trade? If I can't take that much loss comfortably, then either my trade size is too big or I shouldn't be doing this trade at all. So these are the things you need to think about when you're taking trades. Can I afford to take the potential loss? If I place my stop loss here, can I afford to take that loss comfortably? Bearing in mind that is the potential loss, and the upside is potentially to below this point here. So the upside is probably about 2-to-1 here. So I've got 2 times in my favor. And also, I actually expect the movement to be the downside following CPI data. So for me, it's an interesting, useful trade to look at. But again, I'll take into account the trade size and maybe just DCA or something like that. So these, again, are factors that you need to take into account. Ethereum has been very much this. We've had a wave 3. The wave 4 may be complete. We've got A, B, and the C wave is potentially here now. Just move across a little bit, but the actual move was exactly as expected. So that ABC could be entirely complete, or it could be that we see further movement down to complete the C wave, and that would be pretty much in tune with the rest. But Ethereum has actually been the bright spot among cryptos recently, and that's because Ethereum was the most recent one to get this ETF approval. And that's really, I think, what spawned this massive move. It was in advance of the ETF approval, but obviously there's some rumors leaked out. Some people knew it was about to happen. Maybe some people speculated it was about to happen. but that's why we got this massive move up. But now we're just seeing corrective movement to the downside. This does look corrective. So once again, the wave 4 could be complete, or we could be seeing a more extended correction to the downside. But overall, I do see this as being corrective, all still overlapping kind of sideways movement as compared with this solid impulsive movement to the upside here. So I do think that once again soon we'll see some good solid movements upward in Ethereum. But short term, if we see negative CPI data, when I say negative, I mean elevated CPI, then there's no doubt we'll still see a continuation of the correction in Ethereum before we get that next movement to the upside. But Ethereum is still looking to be one of the more robust bets in crypto for the time being. Litecoin is actually one that I shorted the other day. It took a big, deep sell-off, as we can see. There was a sell signal. We can actually see the sell signal here quite nicely. So we had basically what's called hidden bearish divergence. That's where you get the lower peaks in price and the higher peaks in RSI. So we saw that, but then you need to see following it some bearish candles, which we actually saw bearish candles after it. And that was telling us the sell signal here. So we got a bit of a movement down, movement up, but we had the sell signal already because of the hidden bearish divergence was telling us of a continuation of this downward trend in price. And that's precisely what happened. So the point is, I closed my position, my short position, even though I think there's probably more downside to come with the CPI news coming. I closed it because, again, if we just scale out a little bit, we can see that there's been this long-term take profit zone or stop loss zone. You could call it stop loss zone. Basically, when prices move down, there seems to be continued concerted buying in this zone here. So every time the price spikes into this zone, there's buying which takes it back up above. So it's an obvious take profit for me was as soon as we touch this, what I've called a stop loss zone or a take profit zone. So my sell signal was here, my take profit was here. I'm happy to take a profit. Maybe it's not that big, not a massive profit, but I'm happy to take profit and then just sit on the sidelines, maybe waiting for CPI news now. So I've exited all positions now. I don't want to carry the risk anymore. Taking some little profits, and I'll just wait for CPI news because I could be wrong. It could be we get weak CPI and everything goes in completely the opposite direction. Doesn't mean you can't take trades, but I'm a very conservative trader. When I see some nice little profits like this, I'll take them and I'll sit on the sidelines until I see what's happening with CPI. If CPI comes out elevated, I think there'll be more than enough opportunity to take short positions if needed. So that's Litecoin. Again, a great opportunity, some great signals there from a TA perspective that played out perfectly. And we were in this little kind of parallel channel, but we just broke just below it, but it only spiked below. There wasn't a close below it. So there's no enduring sell signal there. As I say, we just spiked into that stop loss zone, which is enough for me of a signal to close my position. XRP is one that got hit a little bit, as we can see. XRP always tends to be one that's hit harder. I do still think there's potentially, I've seen what I think is a W wave down. I think this is some kind of X wave higher. And within the X wave, it looks like a triangle. So A, B, C, D, E. But then the E wave itself looks like a triangle, A, B, C, D, E. And then we're seeing the thrust out of the triangle. So you can often find that the E wave within a triangle is itself a triangle. And I think that's exactly what's happened here. And so, a triangle within a triangle, and then we get the thrust down. And that's a relatively strong thrust. I think it's probably the thrust from it. If this is a W and X, the Y wave will be made up of an ABC itself. So maybe this is the A, maybe this is the B, and maybe we expect to see to the downside. But this, again, appears to be corrective movement to the downside for XRP. WXY is corrective. So we would expect there to be upside, impulsive movement following the correction. So I'm probably going to wait for more downside that I expect. I could be wrong, but I expect most likely there to be more downside on XRP. And I think that would align with the overall expectation on crypto and risk assets, probably following CPI data and obviously the interest rate decision and the commentary and press questions, etc., Q&A session that comes after the interest rate decision. So interest rates are going to stay on hold, but what we will wait for is the commentary from Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and just see what he has to say and what the questions and answers are at the press conference. So that will likely, as I believe, will drive prices down for cryptos and most likely here XRP. But this could create an amazing buy opportunity. So actually, I probably won't be looking to short the market. I'll be looking to wait to see if the market does, if we get strong CPI, if the market sells off, I will then be looking to DCA into long positions, because I still think this is all corrective movement. Wherever you look, yes, it's quite big scale corrective, but it's corrective movement to the downside. So I'm going to be looking and seeking out long positions, but I will wait ideally for me for a bit further pullback before I jump in long. But that could be some major buy opportunities, some major upside, because yes, we're seeing correction going back to Bitcoin. Yes, we're seeing overall corrective movement to the downside, sideways and downside. But following that, I do think we're going to see a massive push to the upside, to new all-time highs for Bitcoin and for a lot of other cryptos. So it's exciting times ahead for those people who are hodling long-term, but also those traders like myself, active traders. We're seeing corrections. If we see further correction to the downside, I'll be DCAing in at various levels to the downside, trying to make sure I'm positioned for what I believe is going to be a really nice move to the upside. Because following elevated inflation, we're going to see still the interest rates staying higher. But at some point, I do believe, unless we see geopolitical issues, I do believe they will get inflation under control. So this sticky movement we've had here, sideways movement, and maybe even a tick up in inflation, I do think that the elevated interest rates will start to slow inflation. And later this year, we'll start to see a decline in inflation. Once we see that, the green light will be on for the Fed, and they'll be able to lower interest rates. And that will be amazing for risk assets. So that is when we're going to see what I believe is probably going to be a massive blow off top for crypto assets and for risk assets. So I'm trying to look at this in context of where we are now, what the immediate expectation is, and what the future expectation is. And I do think that whilst we may see short-term a little bit of elevated CPI, I do think that they're going to get CPI under control. They'll get inflation under control. They'll be able to lower interest rates, and that's going to give a massive boost to risk assets. And it'll be something else that causes we'll get a blow off top, but it'll be something that causes that top to turn around and potentially move back down to the downside. But before that, I think there's an amazing blow off top potentially to come in those risk assets. So S&P 500, just once again, this is actually a really interesting one because I had this, you'll know if you look back, if you listen to previous Impact Money shows, I had this labeled well in advance, weeks, even months in advance, this target for SPX, the S&P 500. This was the overhead target. And I said all along, this is just a corrective pullback. I'm expecting a movement to the upside. I don't think this is the end of the final movement, but I did say it was going to be overhead resistance, that we're going to get a short-term pullback at least from here. But we appear to have some kind of impulsive move here. It's a five-wave move, some kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means we're probably, we're going to get a pullback from here most likely, and that would fit in with elevated CPI possibly on Wednesday, and maybe still a hawkish Fed. That would give us probably a bit more of a sell-off on SPX. But we reached that target. So I said to people all the way along that we should really think, recognize that even this movement back here was just corrective, and we need to push towards this target here before we get a more concerted pullback in the SPX, the S&P 500. So quite amazing that we gave that target. Absolutely. I mean, if I move on to the hourly, we can just see how accurate that was. That, we gave this weeks in advance, this target, and just look at it. We spiked up to target, price reverse, on cue, as we predicted weeks and even months in advance, and price moved down. So let's just see if that continues. But once again, I don't think this is the end of the move higher in SPX. I actually think we're probably going to go higher at some point, but short term, well, I'm actually waiting for buy opportunities. For me, this is not a sensible buy opportunity because this isn't an overhead resistance that we met pretty much precisely. Price was rejected from there, and actually expect now we're going to get a bit of a correction to the downside. If we correct substantially to the downside, then I'll be looking to DCA in again, looking for long positions, and ideally looking for this overhead to break. So I don't think we've seen all-time highs yet. I mean, we have seen all-time highs. I don't think we've seen the all-time high yet. I think after a solid correction, we'll see more upside to come on the SPX, the S&P 500. So like risk assets, like Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, all the rest, I think we're going to get a pullback and then another push here to new all-time highs once again. So the American economy, the world economy is, I think, setting up for a real nice bull run. But before that, we're going to see a correction to the downside. No time, I don't think, today really to focus on any of the others. I know GameStop has been, I mean, it's down 39% today. That's absolutely crazy. That meme stock, which is crazy. I think it's for the benefit of one person only. I don't think that traders are really tending to get the right side of this. It's a big risk for me. I wouldn't get involved in it. I don't like investing in memes. As I said, some of these things, like for example, Book of Memes is not actually a meme coin. It's just involved with memes, that history of memes. So Book of Memes is a good one. Whenever we see some good downside on it, it's one of those tokens that sees good upside. But actually, because overall, I think the danger is to the downside, I'm cautious across the board. So as I say, I've exited long positions personally. Doesn't mean you have to. You need to do your own due diligence. We're not financial advisors, but I just report what I'm doing. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks for having me, and look forward to catching up in person tomorrow. Thanks for listening again, and bye for now.
The great Matt Dixon, great report as always. You know, one of the reasons we do the show, obviously, we like to talk to you. We like to share what we're doing, the trades that we're making. We like to have an influence on the world, right? I mean, it's all really important. But we also want you guys to win, and you know, not financial advice and all that stuff that we're supposed to say. But you know, if you follow these trends and if you follow these indicators in the market and trade with us, you can see how that can be advantageous for you. And even just, you know, him pointing out some of the calls that we've made over the last little while and what could be upcoming this week. Is that a good chance to dollar cost average in, right? You know, that can be really interesting. So he did mention a little bit about kind of the low cap gems that come in from time to time. One of them that we talked about was, and I'm going to share my screen here again. One of them that we talked about was Insect. And Insect is a really interesting one for me, especially because I feel like when I'm looking at small caps like this that come in, and this right here, let me just see if there is sound on this. I'm not sure that there is. So when you see small caps come in and they're, you know, $1 million or 2 million or even 5 million, really under 5 million market cap, and they have a lot going on. And that is very interesting to me because the movement from 1 million to 10 million is a lot of times. I mean, guys, you 10x on something. I mean, come on, that's a great move here. So, Insect, they're producing. I'm gonna switch over to this tab now. A whole different ecosystem. So since it launched, it's up. Since it hit CoinMarketCap, it's up 53.99%. We have a little bit of a better chart over here on DEX Tools where we can see what we're doing here. So from its inception, you can see nice move that it has up here, right? As it's moving and as they're building and as the community is building. So this is a coin on the TON network. And again, we talked about it yesterday, where we're going to be highlighting this a bit because I feel like this is a strong one. Now you have to get TON, you buy TON and then TON coin, and then you buy this one on the DEX. It's a token on the TON network. TON has gone absolutely ballistic over the last little bit. We've talked about TON over the last bit for quite a number of times. TON coin is number 9 in the entire ecosystem right now of cryptos. Let me just share this tab here. We can look at this movement here, up 381% on the year, up 1,600%. Okay, since it started. So that is a sincere asset. Okay, and that's what they built on. And that ecosystem, and that's what I talk about, guys, that ecosystem is exploding. And so when you look at that and you say, okay, and I'm starting to see a lot of different coins launch on TON. This one in specific, Insect, has a lot of the guys behind it appear to be working very hard on getting that done. So what they're producing, and I just had it on there. I'll pull it back up, I guess, while I'm talking about it. What they are producing, share this tab, is a launch pad that's both EVM compatible and non-EVM compatible. And you're going to be able to launch different tokens on it, including tokens in the TON ecosystem. Now, that's important for a number of reasons. One, it gives everybody more liquidity, right? If you're launching projects, there's a lot of money coming into the project. The NFT holders actually earn a reward from the different activity that's going on that launch pad. So very interesting. You can get yourself an NFT. I'll go over all that as we move forward. But yeah, that's one I'm definitely keeping my eye on. I think it's looking very strong. A little bit over $1 million, in between 1 and 1.5 million market cap. It's been fluttering around, but this launch pad can be huge. It's major movement on the TON network. So we'll bring more of that in focus as we move forward. But that is definitely one of the ones that I like. It's been another great show. I know we're about to go on commercials here and on your TV, where you're watching on the Smart Money Culture TV network. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will, of course, be back tomorrow with another report. The plan is to be in Detroit this week for the People's Conference. We're looking forward to that. You can see on the bottom here, 25% discount. Trump will be in Detroit. Really looking forward to that. I think that the more that we can be involved. This is not a time when you want to sit back and not be involved. I mean, that's the long and short of it. You need to be involved, and whether it's being involved, even it can be even small things, whatever it is. But you need to be involved. We're at a point in the history of the world, not just the United States. We're at the point in the history of the world where you need to be involved, and maybe it's this show that you needed to watch that wakes you up and you say, you know what, they're right. I need to be involved. I need to be more active. We need to be, there's different protests that are happening here in DC. I know that many of you are scared to come to DC, and I get it. I understand. But if we want change, we need to come to DC, and because this is where all the players are. This is where it's all happening. So you need to get that on your plans. Your representatives that you elect, they need to see you. Just seeing you at your hometown or something is not enough. Not when the other side is willing to come here and risk everything in order to protest. There's peacefully protesting is something that is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. It's enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. You're supposed to be able to peacefully protest. So that's important, guys. You got it. It's important. Also, as important though is getting together in things like the People's Convention. We're able to get together. We're able to talk, right? And we're able to make things happen that way. So those are important. So that's the I'll pull that up again here. The People's Convention. The People's Convention. Remember, you get a 25% discount if you use the code Impact Money. Impact Money. Share this tab. Here we go. So use the code. Come to Detroit. Come meet us in Detroit. We are very much looking forward to it. This is Turning Point Actions conference. The big people here, the people that we want to talk to. I mean, these are the people that are shaping the conversation. They're the ones that are shaping the conversation that we're involved in. And so it's important to meet each other. It's important to talk to each other. That's what I always say, even about once you hit the world scene, right? It's important to talk to each other. That's what I talk about every day. Whether we're talking about the Ukraine and Russia war, or whether we're talking about Israel and the mess they have over there, we have to talk to each other. And humans are human. Saying that they're not humans or subhumans or something like that is not the case. And one generation of a bad person, and they have a kid that can be totally somebody that will change the world for the better. And these are humans, and so that's something to remember. And that's something I talk about all the time. By the people, for the people, featuring the most prominent names in the movement. This is on their Turning Point People's Convention website. Most prominent names in the movement, a straw poll, thousands of attendees from all 50 states, dozens of sponsoring organizations, and preceding the RNC by 1 month. So the Republican National Committee will be in 1 month. The People's Convention will serve as the national focal point of the national conservative political movement ahead of the 2024 election. Attendees will leave equipped with tools, knowledge, and network to lead their communities to win in November. It is such an important election. And it's going to be really interesting because I don't even really know. I mean, can we win this election with the magic electronic voting machines, with the millions and millions of absentee ballots? They call them mail-in ballots now, but they're basically absentee ballots. And of course, we have about 50 million people who have entered the country illegally over the last years. Okay, so 22 million or so, over 20 million since Biden got in. But I mean, it's good 50 million people, and a lot of those people are embedded here. They have now kids here. They have family here. Deporting those people, even as nice as that might sound to you, or it might not sound nice to you, but deporting those people is going to be a pill that I don't think that the U.S. public is in for. So we got to figure a way forward. Maybe that is part of it, but it's a lot of new people that we need to convince that our way of freedom, our way of government is better, that following the Constitution is a better option than making up new rules, this like pseudo-communist rules that we have, and some of these people that get into office. I also think that probably term limits are a good idea for these people that stay in Congress and the Senate for 30 years, 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, it's crazy. But I could also be talked the other way on that because, you look at, it's like I joke about sometimes we're in the age of the dictator. You have the strong men who are really with the countries that are really making a massive impact. Like look at China, look at Russia, look at these other places. I mean, Syria comes to mind. I don't totally know if that's a perfect one to talk about, but certainly it did come to mind. So anyway, it's important to get involved. I think it's also important, what the central bank is doing with with your money, with the US dollar is a tax instrument. I used to call it a debt instrument, and okay, that's fine. It's debt instrument. Okay. But it's really a tax instrument. And as long as you hold those US dollars, every $100 bill comes with a 3%, approximately a 3% debt to the central bank, which is the Federal Reserve, as it's issued. So every one that they print, they have that. And then as well, they are able to just dilute the supply as much as they want. And every time they do that, they're taking more and more and more of that money away. So again, non-financial advice and all that stuff that we say, but you want to be able to not be sitting in that. So if you had $100,000 back in 1913, okay, Or you're one of those people that got your gold confiscated back in 1933 and they gave you $25 or $35 per ounce and you kept those dollars. I mean, first of all, it's a ridiculous price that they would give you, but you've lost like 98% of your value. The US dollar is the last place you want to be in. And so, I mean, it's a relative term, I suppose, but you want to diversify. You want to be in these different assets, be in some gold, be in some stocks, have some real estate, we trade. Trading is, if you're paying attention, trading can be an amazing way to make what you have more valuable. So another great show, guys. Always a pleasure to do it. We will be back on your TV sets in about 5 hours. Cheers.
Your voice is powerful. When combined with social engagement, it's a force for change. Decentralized media paired with free speech is the catalyst for an empowered world and a unified, invaluable ecosystem. Join Global Boost, become a champion of free speech, and help to reshape the future of media.